She was just fixing her van until an officer caught a glimpse of the tattoo on her arm. A young lieutenant had told her to leave the base. No clearance, no business being there. But when that sleeve rolled up, what they saw wasn't just ink. It was the broken wings of Hawkbreaker Unit 9A combat engineering team declared wiped out in 2008. She wasn't on any roster. But someone remembered, and everything changed. Want to know what that tattoo meant and why a full bird colonel froze when he saw it? Hit subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Let's begin. It was a Monday afternoon, the kind of day where the air sticks to your skin and the sun makes metal too hot to touch. Out back behind the technical hangars at Ellsworth Field, the auxiliary lot was nearly empty. Just heat, silence, and the occasional clink of a tool hitting concrete. Kiona Ward was crouched by the open hood of a faded blue service van. Her sleeves were rolled up, her work shirt gray, sun-bleached, without logos or patches clung loosely to her shoulders. Her khaki pants were stained at the knees. She didn't wear gloves. Her hands were blackened with grease and dust. The van wasn't government-issued. It was hers. Old, loud, and stubborn. It had died 2 miles from the main gate. The gate guard had let her push it to the side of the auxiliary lot. No one had said anything else. Until now. "You can't be working here, ma'am. This zone is for base personnel only." The voice belonged to a young engineer, maybe 25, maybe younger. Hair too perfect, uniform sharp enough to suggest he didn't do much hands-on work. He stepped forward, confused and annoyed. Kiona didn't answer. She tightened the radiator cap, slowly, then reached for a wrench beside her. "Ma'am, this is restricted. Who gave you permission?" Still no response. A few seconds later, a base lieutenant in press fatigues approached from the side. His voice was firmer, his posture more official. "I need to see your access credentials." Kiona stood slowly. Her height wasn't imposing, barely 5'5", but something in her stillness made the air feel heavier. "I'm just fixing my own van," she said, calm and direct. "Broke down on the road in." "This isn't a parking garage," the lieutenant replied. "There are security systems and UAVs within 50 yards, no exceptions for civilians." Her shoulders didn't move. Her eyes didn't blink. She simply nodded once and said, "Understood." She reached up with her right arm to wipe sweat from her forehead. That's when her sleeve slipped back. For a moment, no one said anything. On her upper arm, faded, silver gray, and partially burned, was a tattoo. A pair of broken wings, frayed at the tips. Beneath them, in block lettering, the designation, Hawkbreaker 9. The young engineer's smirk disappeared. The lieutenant took a half step back. Just 30 feet away, Colonel Elijah McGraw had been inspecting a drone array. He turned toward the commotion. When he saw her arm, his face changed. He didn't call for backup. He didn't raise his voice. He simply walked forward, slow and deliberate, until he stood just a few feet from her. His eyes locked on the tattoo. "That ink," he said, voice low. "That's real?" Kiona didn't flinch. She didn't explain. She just rolled her sleeve back down. McGraw knew what he was looking at. Hawkbreaker Unit 9 had been declared KIA in 2008. All personnel lost during Operation Cinderline, a siege that took down an entire mobile engineering base in southern Afghanistan. No bodies recovered. No names released. It was the kind of unit that barely existed on paper. A classified repair group trained to operate under combat fire, rebuild damaged systems in real time, and disappear when the mission was done. Their emblem, a set of broken wings, hadn't been seen in 15 years. And now here it was, on the arm of a woman tightening a coolant line behind an abandoned hangar. Colonel McGraw didn't say anything else. He just stared. The lines around his eyes deepened. His jaw clenched, but he didn't speak. Not yet. Kiona lowered the hood of her van, clipped it shut, and began quietly packing her tools. The lieutenant cleared his throat. "Please remove your vehicle from this area." She nodded once. No protest, no words. Only the sound of a socket wrench being set gently into a canvas bag. And a memory, a symbol returning from the grave. Colonel Elijah McGraw didn't believe in ghosts. He'd served long enough to know what war could do to memory and how the mind sometimes rewrote the unbearable parts. But this wasn't a trick of memory. That tattoo, that symbol, the broken wings, the designation, Hawkbreaker 9, He'd seen it once before. Not in real life. Not on skin. In a classified photograph buried in a red folder during his final year at Langley, the image had stuck with him, burned in really, a female figure, small frame, posture rigid, standing in the middle of what had once been a mobile command station. The building behind her was engulfed in flames. Communications gear lay twisted and blackened on the ground. She was wearing a burn suit, her face obscured by a soot-covered emergency mask. Only her right arm was visible, holding a severed cable, her sleeve rolled back, revealing the tattoo. That photo had no name, no timestamp, just a short caption. Unidentified engineer, post, dust-off. Cinderline AO, 2008. Most people wouldn't have thought twice. But McGraw did. Because he'd read the after-action reports from Cinderline. He'd flown support missions in the area after the base went silent. He'd seen what the enemy had done to it. The only reason his unit didn't walk straight into an ambush was because someone had kept the navigation beacon online, rerouting inbound air support. According to the report, Hawkbreaker Unit 9, a classified combat engineering detachment, was posted there. Their mission: maintain electronic infrastructure and defense systems under field conditions without standard support. Their status: entirely Kaya. All 14 names on the roster had been listed as unrecovered. Official language: presumed deceased due to structural collapse and thermal destruction. Translation: no one walked out. Except someone clearly had. And now, 15 years later, that someone was squatting beside a service van in a base maintenance lot, adjusting a water line under the midday sun. McGraw's mind spun back through details he hadn't thought about in years. He remembered a side note in a medical addendum. One line, redacted in later versions. Subject sustained third-degree burns to lower legs and torso. Despite trauma, continued to execute system repairs. Final visual confirmation entering comms, bunker alone. No contact after 1,700 hours. There was never a recovery mission. The base had been written off. Burned out, collapsed. A crater surrounded by silence. But someone had survived. And she had never come forward. McGraw looked back across the concrete yard. Kiana Ward was already folding up her canvas tool bag. Her sleeves were rolled down now, the tattoo no longer visible, but he had seen it. And he remembered the exact curve of those wings, broken at the middle, one slightly scorched at the edge, a design only a handful of personnel ever knew existed. He pulled out his phone and tapped into the tactical data archive. Requesting image verification, he said quietly. Hawkbreaker Unit 9 emblem. Confirm origin of a broken wing tattoo. Field, applied, upper right arm. Silver ink. Possible match to image file, Z Alpha, Dustvale, Cinderline. There was a pause on the line. Then a voice replied, hesitant. Sir, that file is under compartmentalized classification. Top secret, sealed since 2009. Unseal it, McGraw said flatly. Authorization, McGraw, Delta, Niner. A few seconds passed. Confirmation granted. The screen loaded slowly. A familiar image appeared, grainy, scorched around the edges. There she was. Same arm, same tattoo, same build. Different name. No name at all. McGraw lowered the phone. He didn't need more confirmation. She was the engineer in the photo, the one who'd vanished into smoke and paperwork, the one who'd saved 2 units and a medical evac flight with her repair sand, then disappeared before anyone could ask her why. He closed his eyes briefly. In all the years since that operation, no one had ever explained how the beacon at Cinderline stayed lit after the generators failed. No one had claimed responsibility. Now he knew why. Because the one who did it had chosen silence. And now she was here. He took a slow step toward the admin building, mind already moving. Kiona Ward wasn't a contractor anymore. She was something else entirely. Colonel McGraw didn't speak to anyone as he stepped inside the secure communications wing. He didn't issue an order, didn't explain why he was there. He just walked to the terminal that still had direct access to cold archive storage and logged in using a clearance code he hadn't touched in over a decade. He typed the name slowly, Operation Cinderline. The server took longer than it should have. Most records had been moved to deep storage years ago. Some had been deleted. Others flagged as not for retrieval without Joint Command approval. But McGraw still had legacy access, one of the few remaining officers from that era. He opened the final field report from the mission. Hawkbreaker Unit 9. Status: full loss. No survivors. Post-engagement evaluation. Site deemed unrecoverable due to structural collapse and continuous hostile presence. The pages read cold and clinical. Coordinates: shell impact zones. Enemy movement estimates. Air reconnaissance photos showing a base reduced to smoldering debris. And then, buried near the bottom of a supplemental medical intelligence entry, a single line. Faintly highlighted, almost erased by time. One unidentified female engineer remained operational during siege. Final status: presumed dead. McGraw stared at it. He clicked open the full log. It had been entered by a forward operating medic attached to a support wing, a man whose name McGraw recognized. The entry detailed multiple injuries to the subject: third-degree burns to the lower extremities, cracked ribs, suspected internal trauma, but noted that the individual refused evac, refused morphine, and continued working inside the power relay tunnels. She had been seen crawling through vent shafts to reach the comms bunker on day 17. Last visual contact: 1,723 hours. Subject entered comm structure carrying portable ignition cell. Structure engulfed by flames 2 minutes later. No signs of egress, no remains recovered. McGraw leaned back. He remembered that fire. The black pillar of smoke visible from miles out. The silence on every channel. Rescue teams had been ordered to wait until the site was declared cold. By the time anyone got boots on the ground, the only things left were melted antennae and buried wires. The official report had never questioned the engineer's actions, because no one had believed she existed. Until now. He opened the image file again, the same one he had pulled up an hour ago in the yard. The woman in the burn suit, the broken wings on her arm. He zoomed in slowly. The edges of the tattoo were uneven, not printed, not stenciled, hand-inked in the field. Old military style, done by someone who expected it to last a lifetime or die with them. Beneath the wings were barely legible characters. OX B77, the operating code for Hawkbreaker's mobile field unit. The last digits matched the portable beacon she had carried into the flames. McGraw didn't move for a long time. Outside, the base continued its rhythm. Trucks rolled past. Radios clicked. Someone laughed in the hallway. But in this quiet room, one thought settled like dust on his shoulders. She didn't die. She lived. She made it out. And somehow, for 15 years, she never told a soul. Not to get recognition. Not for medical pension. Not even to clear her own name in the record. She just vanished. Reappeared years later under a civilian contract. Patching water systems. Cleaning filters. Soldering broken pump lines. And never once said a word about what she'd done. McGraw closed the file and pulled up her current personnel record. Ward, Kayana civilian contractor, Utility Support Division, no known prior military affiliation, no VA file, no active service record. A blank slate. Deliberate. Built by someone who wanted to be forgotten. But not today. McGraw picked up the phone and called the base security chief. I want Kayana Ward brought back to command. Not as a contractor. As a subject of formal review, full security escort now. The chief sounded surprised. Yes, sir. Any reason given? McGraw paused. Then quietly replied, She's not who we thought she was. Summer, 2008, southern Afghanistan. The Cinderline Forward Operations Base wasn't on any map. That was the point. It was designed to move, to hide in plain sight a maze of shipping containers, antennae, comm towers, and modular buildings deep in the Helmand Desert. Most of its personnel were listed under different units. Most of their missions never made it into official reports. Kayana Ward wasn't even supposed to be there. She had been pulled off active duty 3 weeks earlier, knee damage from a convoy rollover, minor but enough to warrant medical leave. She was sent to a recovery site 40 clicks east of Cinderline, told to stay off her feet and wait for reassignment. But when the radios went dead and when the first distress code broke through the static, she knew where it came from. She recognized the signal pattern. She'd helped program it. No one ordered her to go back. She packed her tool belt, 3 sets of batteries, and a portable igniter pack. She didn't take a rifle. She wasn't cleared for weapons while on medical hold. She didn't have a radio, no sat link, no team. She walked the last 4 miles on foot. By the time she reached Cinderline, the first perimeter had already been breached. The sky above the base was filled with smoke and ash. Ground sensors were down. Internal comms had failed. The primary generator station had been shelled 2 nights prior, and all remaining power came from backup inverters rigged to last maybe 6 hours. Most of Hawkbreaker Unit 9 had been scattered into tunnel sectors, trying to maintain life support systems, targeting relays and navigation beacons. Most didn't last the first week. Kiona didn't look for orders. She found a maintenance hatch near the east grid and climbed down into the old cable corridors, the crawl spaces no one wanted to use because they were too hot, too tight, and filled with copper snakes from every project patched together since the start of the war. That became her home. For 17 days, she lived between pipes and steel walls, eating emergency rations, drinking coolant runoff run through makeshift filters, sleeping 2 hours at a time. Every time a relay blew, she crawled toward the sparks. Every time a surge threatened the nav system, she yanked out the bypass and started over by hand. She rerouted energy through fried boards. She spliced cables using nail clippers. She used burned paper clips as jumpers. On the 12th day, she jammed a portable battery into the backbone line to keep the satellite link alive for 6 more hours. Her hands blistered. Her knee swelled. Her hearing faded on one side from a near miss when the fuel depot went up. But the navigation system kept running. And because it did, a medevac flight made it through. And then another. And then an air support drop. And Cinderline, despite everything, held. Not because of firepower, not because of planning, because one person refused to let the lights go out. By day 17, only 5 engineers remained unaccounted for. Only one system still worked. The final transmission relay buried beneath the comms bunker. Kiona knew what it would take to bring it online. She limped across the compound in daylight, dragging a portable ignition cell behind her, wrapped in fire blanket and strapped to her chest with scavenged wiring. She was last seen stepping through the warped metal door of the comms bunker at 17:23 hours. 2 minutes later, the building exploded. No one ever saw her again. No one recovered a body. And no one questioned the final miracle, that just before the explosion, one last coded beacon pinged off the edge of the satellite grid, leading evac teams straight to the coordinates they needed. It didn't have a name attached. But the system code embedded in that signal? Oxby 77. The same code etched beneath the tattoo she carried to this day. Colonel Elijah McGraw didn't call it an interrogation. There were no legal briefs, no recording devices, no brass watching from behind glass. Just one chair, one desk, and a pot of coffee growing cold on a shelf by the wall. Kiona Ward entered the temporary command office without hesitation. She didn't ask why she'd been called. She didn't look around. She just stepped inside, nodded once, and took her seat across from him. She looked exactly as she had 2 hours earlier, in the yard sleeves rolled down, work shirt still streaked with dust, her tool bag left just outside the door. McGraw studied her for a long moment before speaking. "You're not a civilian anymore," he said, his voice low and steady. "You're a living record of something the rest of us buried." Kiona didn't blink. "I knew this day would come," she said calmly. "I just didn't want it to." McGraw leaned forward slightly. "You could have come back. You could have walked into any VA office, into any base, and said who you were." "I could have," she nodded. "But what would have been the point?" She looked down briefly at her hands, rough from labor, cracked at the knuckles. Cinderline didn't exist anymore. The unit was gone. There was no one left to report to, nothing left to explain, and no one would have believed me. "I would have," McGraw said, more sharply than he meant to. She looked up. He steadied himself. "You kept the nav systems alive for 17 days. That saved 2 platoons, 3 air crews, and a medevac run carrying 11 wounded. That wasn't maintenance. That was the difference between a crater full of bodies and a base that stayed standing long enough to matter." Kiona shook her head gently. "I didn't save the base," she said. "I saved the signal. Other people saved the base." McGraw paused. That sentence, that distinction, told him more about who she was than any file ever could. He asked the question anyway. Why didn't you come forward? Not even for recognition. Just to correct the record? She didn't answer right away. Then, because the record was easier to leave behind than explain. If I came back, people would ask how I survived when no one else did. And I didn't want to answer that. McGraw could feel something rising in his throat. Not anger, not guilt. Something quieter, something heavier. They need to know, he said softly. Not for medals, not for the paperwork, for the truth. For the ones who never came home, someone has to speak for them. Kyona's gaze didn't waver. I have been, she said. Every time I fixed a pipe no one wanted to touch. Every time I rewired a panel before anyone else noticed the fault. Every time I showed up early, stayed late, and didn't put my name on anything. That was my way of remembering them. He nodded slowly. That was her version of a headstone. Not marble, not ceremony. Function, continuity, quiet service. McGraw stood up. You don't need rank, he said, but you deserve to be acknowledged for what you did. Kyona stood too, but didn't reach for a handshake. I don't want a plaque, she said. I don't want to make speeches. I just want to keep fixing things that still need fixing. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, McGraw stepped aside. You're free to go, he said. She nodded once, walked out, and picked up her tool bag without a word. But in the days that followed, every name in the Hawkbreaker 9 roster was restored in the archive. And beside the last line, one sentence was added. Final survivor identified, service ongoing. The invitations came anyway. An official commendation from Central Command. A request for a Bronze Star review. An offer from a major cable network to tell her story. Even a letter hand-signed suggesting she be honored at Arlington during Memorial Week. Kyona Ward declined them all. Formally, calmly, without hesitation. She didn't need a camera crew. She didn't want a podium. She didn't want to be called a hero by people who hadn't been there. I'm not looking for credit, she told the base administrator. I'm looking for a wrench that fits a strip bolt in pump room 2. Word spread. Fast. Within 48 hours, her quiet act of refusal had moved through the officer corps and into contractor briefings. Everyone knew who she was, or thought they did. Half a dozen staff members tried to thank her in passing. She nodded politely, but never stopped moving. Colonel McGraw requested one more meeting. Not official, not formal, just a conversation. They sat across from each other again, this time in the hangar bay, where the buzz of tools and ventilation fans made eavesdropping impossible. He asked, simply, why did you do it? She tilted her head slightly. Do what? Crawl back into a burning base, he said. Fix equipment under fire. Stay behind when everyone else was gone. And do it all without orders, without backup, without even a radio. She looked away for a second, then said quietly, because I heard them calling. McGraw didn't answer. I was injured, on leave. I had no assignment, but I heard the distress code. I knew the system, I could help. That was enough. Even though it wasn't your post anymore? Units are paper, she said. People are real. He let the weight of that hang for a moment, then asked, and after all of it, why stay hidden? Kyona's eyes met his. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life explaining why I was the only one who made it out. I didn't want to answer the question that always comes next. Why you and not them? She took a breath, steady but tired. I didn't survive for recognition. I survived because the system needed to keep working, because people needed a way out. McGraw nodded slowly. No politics, no bitterness, just function and principle. You've been carrying their legacy for 15 years, he said. I'll carry it for the rest of my life, she replied. That night, McGraw sent a formal update to military personnel records. No ceremony, no press release. Just a quiet addition in the classified section of the Hawkbreaker Unit 9 file. Ward, Kyona, identified as sole survivor of Cinderline AO. Status, active civilian. Recognition declined at subject's request. There were no medals mailed, no new uniforms issued. But quietly, within the base, a shift occurred. The younger techs started paying more attention to their checklists. Maintenance crews began checking solder joints twice instead of once. One evening, a junior engineer paused while walking past her and asked, Ma'am, can you show me the field splice you used on that secondary inverter? She nodded, showed him, said nothing else. And the next day, he passed it down to someone else. Kiona didn't want honor. She wanted integrity. And if the lights stayed on because of that, then that was enough. Kiona Ward never returned to active military service. She didn't request reinstatement. She didn't ask for benefits or honors. She showed up each morning at 530, just as she always had, and got to work. Water pressure irregular in the barracks? She fixed it. Power fluctuations in the UAV hangar? She was already there, crouched under the panel, sleeves rolled back. No fanfare. No one asked her to clock in. 1 week after her name was restored in the archives, a wooden placard quietly appeared outside her station in the maintenance bay. No ceremony, no announcement, just 4 words burned into oak. Kiona Ward, who never abandons machines. Nor people. She never commented on it, she never touched it. But everyone else did. The younger engineers, those in their 20s and 30s, started calling her by name. They began studying her repairs, asking questions, not out of curiosity, out of respect. And somewhere in those routine conversations, something took root. They started referring to her methods, especially her emergency field repairs, as a system. They called it Ward Protocol 9. It was simple. Never assume a system is too far gone. Reroute, reinforce, repurpose. Do what's needed with what you have. And don't wait for approval if someone's life is at stake. The name stuck. When a faulty junction box overheated during a nighttime refueling operation, one of the junior techs shouted, "Run it Ward style." Everyone knew what that meant. Bypass the relay, ground the arc, prioritize the critical loop. It worked. No damage, no injuries. That's when people started whispering what they hadn't dared say before. Maybe she really did keep that base alive. 2 months later, a storm rolled through the Gulf Coast. A Category 4 hurricane. 70-mile-per-hour winds. Hospitals lost power across 3 counties. Evacuation protocols failed in a rural clinic outside Baton Rouge. Kiona heard about it on the base comms board. No one asked her to go. She went anyway. She didn't bring a suitcase. She brought a 40-pound field inverter, a toolkit, and a hand-drawn schematic for rewiring outdated hospital generators. She arrived before sunrise. The staff was already preparing to move 200 patients by flashlight. The main generators were flooded. No one could get the backups online. She worked for 72 hours straight. No breaks, no interviews, no news coverage. Just wire after wire, fuse after fuse, system after system until lights returned, equipment stabilized, and every single patient was safely moved out. One nurse, days later, gave the only quote the outside world would ever hear. She didn't say much. She just kept things running. I don't think she slept. Back at Ellsworth, she returned to work without a word. No one asked what happened. But from then on, anytime an engineer muttered, "Ward Protocol," people stood a little straighter. Because now they knew it wasn't just a way of working. It was a way of serving. 1 year later, Ellsworth Field had the highest equipment reliability rating in the entire Air Force. It wasn't because of new funding. It wasn't because of modern software. It was because Kiona Ward had trained 24 people in how to make things work when nothing else would. How to see problems before they became failures. How to keep the mission alive, not by following procedure, but by understanding purpose. And she never once called it training. She just worked. New techs arriving at Ellsworth heard the same thing on their first day. If something seems beyond repair, ask Kiona. Most of them had no idea who she really was. They just knew she could fix anything. And when she said, "Check it again," they checked it again. She never wore rank. Never mentioned Hawkbreaker. Never told stories about the war. But when a system lit back up under impossible conditions, someone always whispered, "She's the reason." You didn't see her at award ceremonies. You saw her under the sink. By the breaker panel. Out by the fuel tanks in the middle of a rainstorm holding a soldering iron with steady hands. She didn't like being watched. She preferred motion. Silence. Tools in hand. But you remembered her anyway. You remembered the way people cleared a path when she walked into a room. The way the guards started raising the gate before she even showed her badge. The way officers who outranked her still said, "Ma'am." She never asked for it, but she had earned it. And somewhere on some base, on some dusty patch of concrete, another junior tech is going to look at a blown relay and mutter, "Let's try the ward fix." And it's going to work. Because she taught them how to believe in a solution even when no one else thought it was possible. Look closer. That quiet woman in the corner, tightening the seal on a leaking pipe, she might be the reason your power stayed on. The reason your convoy didn't get lost. The reason the evac chopper knew where to land. She might be the reason you're still here. In a world that often forgets quiet service, Kiona Ward reminds us that purpose doesn't need permission and that dignity doesn't require a spotlight. She didn't ask for recognition. She simply did what needed to be done, even when no one was looking. Because sometimes, helping isn't about duty. It's about knowing you can and doing it anyway. Her story is a tribute to those who show up early, stay late, and carry burdens without applause. It's for the veterans who still fix things others gave up on. For the caretakers, the workers behind the scenes, the ones who choose action over attention. So, if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever wondered whether quiet effort matters, let Kiona's legacy be your answer. Yes, it matters. And someone, somewhere, is better off because of you. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing for more real stories of quiet courage and honor. And before you go, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your story too. Until next time, stay strong, stay steady, and never stop fixing what still needs fixing.